That's the beginning of the big cult movie, the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Now you're looking at the fans of the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Every weekend night at midnight, these devoted fans dress up in the costumes of the characters in the movie and dance in front of the screen even before the picture begins. The Rocky Horror Picture Show is a prime example of midnight movie madness. It's truly a cult film. The time warp dance from the Rocky Horror Picture Show. That's not your average movie, and this is not your average sneak preview show. Now, normally on sneak previews, we review new movies. This season, however, we have a new sneak previews feature called Sneak Previews Take Two, in which we take a more in-depth look at movie genres, issues, and trends, where the movies are now and where they're headed. This show is about midnight movies and what makes a cult film. And this is Roger Ebert, film critic of the Chicago Sun-Times.
And this is Gene Siskel, film critic of the Chicago Tribune. So what does make a cult film? Well, at first they didn't play at midnight, and nobody even called them cult films. And at first, when people started going to the same movies again and again and again, they weren't cult films. They were merely classic old movies that had been rediscovered by a new generation. In the early 60s, college students started lining up for the great old Humphrey Bogart masterpieces like The Maltese Falcon and Casablanca. Suddenly, Bogey was a cult hero of the 60s and no longer just a movie star from the 30s or 40s. Fans saw the movie so often they learned the dialogue by heart and started reciting it along with the movie. Maybe that was the beginning of the tradition of audience participation in cult films. Bogart was the biggest of the born-again heroes, but he wasn't the only one. Younger filmgoers rediscovered W.C. Fields, whose infinite cynicism rang a bell with them. The Marx Brothers, whose comic anarchy seemed even more timely in the late 60s than it was in the 1930s.
Yes, and once they got into the cult film habit with old films, the young moviegoers began looking for new films to see week after week. The films they championed had at least two things in common. They were flops, these pictures, when they were first released, and they embraced anti-establishment attitudes that were popular with young people. Two of the biggest cult films of the late 60s were King of Hearts, in which the inmates of an asylum turned out to be more sane than their keepers, and Harold and Maude, in which society's standard of who should be loving whom was challenged by a love affair between a teenage boy and a woman in her 80s.
So all kinds of movies began to qualify as cult films. Good old movies like Casablanca, good new movies like King of Hearts. Maybe it was only a matter of time until audiences started going to bad old movies, movies that were, their fans explained, so bad they were good. One of the first cult films in that category was a 1930s classroom classic designed to sound the alarm against the dangers of marijuana. It was called Reefer Madness, and it painted a lurid and laughable portrait of life on pot. Makes The Lost Weekend look like a month in the Caribbean. Reefer Madness made it horrendously clear that if you smoked the forbidden weed, there'd be all sorts of terrible consequences. Not only would you start playing the piano too fast, like the victims of our last scene, but later on in the movie, the victims of pot start hurling themselves from windows. It was worse than the Depression. There aren't any records of how effective the warnings of Reefer Madness were in the 1930s, but when the film resurfaced in the early 70s as a cult film, it served almost as propaganda in favor of pot. And the movie served as a transition from rediscovered classics that everyone could identify with to more underground films that became elaborate in-jokes for their audiences.
So right away we learned two things about cult films. One, they're anti-establishment, like that picture, at least the way it was being viewed. And second, that the audience is more important in a way than the picture. You know, when you walk into most theaters, you want to be alone. You don't want to hear anyone talk. Not so in cult films. You want to laugh with the audience. You almost compete with the people in the audience to laugh at that film and to show how much you're in the know.
I think another thing that Reefer Madness did, as opposed, let's say, to Casablanca, was it was more exclusionary. I mean, anyone could walk into Casablanca and see that it was a good film, I suppose.
Right.
But people who are cult film audience members or aficionados or addicts want to see the film again and again, almost in order to form a kind of community there in the dark. They have their own set of values, their own reference points. They know why the movie is funny in a way that the square walking in off the street doesn't, so it's kind of an in-joke, as it were.
Sure, and that's true, I guess, with all kinds of cults, religious cults or movie cults. They're exclusionary. We got it, you don't.
Right.
Now, the one cult film that has gained the strongest hold on its audience is the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Like Harold and Maude and King of Hearts, Rocky Horror was a financial bust in its first engagements nationwide, but after theater owners started playing the film only on weekend nights at midnight, Rocky Horror became much more than a movie. It became an event. Every theater where it plays becomes something like a nightclub. The experience here in Chicago is typical. The Biograph Theater here has been selling out every Friday and Saturday midnight show for almost 2 years now. The party starts outside in the street even before the movie begins. The young fans compete to see who can see the film most often, and they even dress up like characters in the movie. Parents, where are your children? But to be fair to the kids, there are plenty of adults who regularly meet other folks in bars every weekend. All these kids are doing is meeting their friends in a movie theater. So much for the Rocky Horror audience. As for the film, it begins with a young man, Barry Bostwick, proposing marriage to a young woman, Susan Sarandon. They're both as straight as they can be. They're cute. But what the audience is really waiting for is when this straight couple is stunned into silence after they stumble into a house occupied by an outer space visitor, Dr. Frank N. Furter, played by Tim Curry. Mr. Furter is anything but straight. Just great. It's great when he throws that water into the lens of the camera. The audience then throws water on each other. That's the kind of interplay there is between the film and the audience. It's well made, but you're never going to hear it, not like you just heard it, if you venture out to see Rocky Horror in a movie theater. Oh, you'll see the film all right, but you won't hear it. The audience in city after city, and I guess that means we're really living in a global village, the audience sings along with every song and shouts wisecracks at almost every character. When that guy drops the ring in front of the theater, in front of the church there, they yell at him, what an idiot he is, every time they see it. Rocky Horror is the perfect cult film. It's mildly shocking, it ridicules things old and things proper, and it features young music. It's the first film that by itself is a double feature. One show on the screen, the other in the audience.
You know, Gene, I think you made a good point there when you said it is a double feature, because I had a chance to see it when it was a single feature. When it first came out as a theatrical film, I saw it in a theater where everybody was quiet, and we were all listening to it and watching it. That film hasn't been seen like that in years, and maybe it's just as well, because I don't want to get too many letters, hate mail from the Frank N. Footer fan club. But
will.
Actually, this film is pretty thin if you look at it just as a film. The whole key is it's an event. People go, they react, the audience is a show, there's a show on the screen, the byplay back and forth, the feeling of coming ritualistically every Friday or Saturday night, the whole thing together is what makes it into a cult.
And it's that second film in the audience that is the real important one.
Yeah.
Because, you know, let's say the film broke down. Let's say the print didn't show up in one of these theaters, any theater across the country. If they didn't have the movie, they'd still have the movie. The kids had acted out up on stage. It'd be just as entertaining.
I think in a way maybe the whole sense of reunion is more important maybe than the film. Because when they come time after time, when they see the film, they are, in a sense, rejecting what goes on outside the theater. I think if we had the United States Census Office this year take a survey on how many people are in favor of Transylvanian transsexual transvestites, it'd be a pretty low percentage, as a matter of fact.
That's just the point. The kids prefer those weird characters in the movie to the straight characters in the movie, so it acts out a fantasy of their own. They prefer the weird guys. Again, it's a cult of weirdness.
They at least 1 or 2 nights a week. I think we don't want to make the movie seem like it's too extreme or too terrible or too horrible. It's kind of cheerful and charming in its own way, despite what the scenes might have looked like. But Rocky Horror makes fun of the horror movie genre. It's not really scary, but there are other midnight cult films that are gruesomely horrible. And one of the best, or one of the worst, depending upon your point of view, is George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, which was only fairly successful when it was first released in 1967. But as the 1970s marched along, movie audiences seemed to rediscover their appetite for being scared out of their skins. And that's exactly what this next film does. Night of the Living Dead is shot in a deliberately grainy black and white newsreel style, and it's about human survivors barricading themselves in a cabin against an attack by flesh-eating zombies. The moment when those arms come through the wall, it's kind of one of those scenes I call a levitation scene. Everybody in the audience rises 3 inches out of the theater seat. Night of the Living Dead is crude at times. You could see that, and it's unevenly acted, unevenly directed. But at the basic gut level of shocking and scaring its audiences, it is gruesomely effective. So effective, indeed, that it became the only cult film to ever inspire its own sequel. In 1979, George Romero filmed another zombie attack called Dawn of the Dead, and this time it has a nice balance of the gruesome and the satirical as the zombies attack a suburban shopping center and lurch between the retail displays to the melodies of Muzak. Kind of a weird creepiness to the humor there. What you have are zombies launching an attack on shopping centers, which are kind of chain store paradises, standing for the middle-class consumer values of most of the parents of young cult filmgoers. And Dawn of the Dead very effectively alternates its satire with pure, unadulterating ghoulishness. So the satire and the bloody violence somehow irresistibly bring audiences back again and again.
You know, there are 2 films now, one black and white, Night of the Living Dead, and then this one in color. Only one is the cult film, really, and that's that first one in black and white, which looks like it was made by an amateur filmmaker. I think kids are drawn to things that don't look like they were made by adults, that don't smack of anything conservative or establishment or money, so they like that rough-hewn film. They don't even like establishment movies.
Maybe so. Maybe the second one with its satire on shopping centers is not as viscerally interesting as the first one, which is a raw assault, an aggressive assault on their senses. It causes them to be scared. It causes them to feel things and to have an immediate experience, and maybe that's what they're going for in the cult
I think
film.
that's exactly what they're going for. There almost seems to be a competition among cult films to see which one can be the roughest and the raunchiest. Now, in the early 70s, a young Baltimore filmmaker named John Waters won the Gross-Out Trophy with his film Pink Flamingos. It's an intentionally disgusting comedy about two couples competing for the title of, get this, the most disgusting couple in America. The film star is a 300-pound male transvestite named Divine, who is anything but. In this scene, Divine and her son poison the dining room of a competing couple by licking every object in it. You think that's bad? That's mild stuff compared to the rest of what goes on in this film. A chicken is crushed in a sexual act. Divine tars and feathers her enemies, and in a disgusting grand finale, she eats excrement. This is not nice stuff, but that's the point. That's what sells Pink Flamingos. It's a trial by fire somehow for young people. Can they survive it? To do so becomes a perverse badge of honor. Again, it's not just a movie, it's an event.
You know, Gene, I was thinking back to my own days as a teenager, and of course everybody who goes to cult films is not a teenager, but they tend to be, let's say, high school, college age,
Yes.
and so forth. And there's almost a compulsion at that age to seek out things that will gross other people out, especially your parents.
Right.
And if you can absolutely horrify them, they throw up their hands in dismay. They think that they've absolutely got to wipe out the younger generation. They failed. Well, then the kids have succeeded, and that's in a way what this is. It's like when I was a kid, Mad Magazine. Adults thought it should have been burned the moment a new issue was published.
I had friends who were not allowed to buy comic books or even read them because it was going to rot their mind. Again, kids love anything that smacks of being rotten and awful,
Right.
and that's what's happened, at least now to the cult
Now,
film.
you started out, for example, 10 years ago with Night of the Living Dead, eating human flesh. You know, we now almost feel after Pink Flamingos a certain nostalgia for the days when all they did in movies was eat flesh. So what we've kind of seen here during this program, during the whole program, and look
Yeah.
at cult films, is can we call it a descent into decadence,
Yep.
from the high style of the Bogart films through the high camp of the Rocky Horror Picture Show into the gruesome effectiveness of the Living Dead zombies, and now into the rock bottom, deliberately nauseating, disgusting, awful sleaze of Pink Flamingos. Will the cult film, which had such brave beginnings, end up in the gutter? Well, maybe not. Let's take a look now at a cheerful new contender for cult status. It's hard to predict where the cult film audience is going to turn next, because after all, cult fans specialize in staying out of step with everyone else, but there is one new film this year that does seem to have a chance of breaking into the cult big time. It's a cheap but lively little musical called Rock and Roll High School. It's already been successful at midnight shows in Chicago and Toronto, and it embraces the favorite message of all cult films, which is down with the establishment. Now, in this scene, a high school principal wants to bar rock and roll music at her high school. And through the roof. Rock and Roll High School stars a punk rock group called the Ramones, and the funny thing is the look and sound of the singers in the Ramones seems to have been partly inspired by none other than the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Here are the Ramones arriving for a concert. Inevitable screaming fans, part of the cultural furniture of our time. Will Rock and Roll High School be the next cult classic? Gene, I think that's what you're predicting, right?
Yes, I know that kids are going to like the scene where they burn down the high school. I also think this is one of those rock and roll will never die films. Those have been popular for 20 years. But I'm a little bit nervous. You're 37, I'm 33. Here we are, people slightly over 21 recommending cult films. I don't know. Do we know what we're talking about?
Are you saying if this program recommends Rock and Roll High School, that's the kiss of death?
In a way, maybe, because I don't think the people who go to cult films want to have them picked for them by somebody else. They want to discover them their own.
So if you like Rock and Roll High School, you didn't hear it here first.
Okay.
Let me ask you something. These kids, we've seen them say that they go to the same movie kind of ritualistically 12, 50, 100 times. What does that say about their movie-going habits?
Well, it says one good thing and maybe one not so good thing. The good thing is they're picking up on the energy of these cult films. They're striking out against the dullness, of mainstream Hollywood filmmaking.
Right.
And I like that, too. You know, I would rather watch that 300-pound transvestite, Divine, lick the stuff in a dining room rather than listen to some of the boring dining room conversations that come out of mainstream Hollywood films, and especially TV, which is what these kids see a lot of. So in that way, I think they're onto something good. The bad thing may be if that's all they see are these cult pictures. If you see one film a week and it's the same film, you're not supporting good movies. And as a result, you're hurting the movie industry, and we need more people going and asking for better films, not seeing the same one over and over.
If there is maybe a good point, though, about the fact that they go again and again, at least they are not zombies in the sense of the characters in Night of the Living Dead or Dawn of the Dead, because the audience participation. So if we had a picture of everybody sitting there at midnight just frozen looking at the screen like this, that would be terrible. But the audience participation that the kids get into makes it into, it's kind of fresh, it's cheerful, it's fun. I think that's the key, probably, to enjoying a midnight movie is participating. You have to know what's going to happen next, and then you join right in. Now, look how the audience reacts during this scene from the Rocky Horror Picture Show. The heroes, Brad and Janet, are singing in the rain, and out in the audience of the theater, the loyal fans act out the scene with squirt guns to make rain, and then they hold newspapers over their heads for rain hats. I guess the lesson there is that if you're going to go to this Rocky Horror Picture Show, you need the right props. You can't tell the actors without a squirt gun.
Very good. And your bag of props should also include a roll of toilet paper. Midway through the movie, a scientist by the name of Dr. Scott glides through the house in a wheelchair being pulled by a giant magnet. Watch what happens when one of the characters yells, "Great Scott." Amazing. Those kids are throwing rolls of Scott toilet tissue at the screen. Get it, huh?
Yeah, I got it, Gene. It was very subtle, but I think I did get it, yeah.
Do you think there are any of these films that the average moviegoer wants to see if they want to check out one cult film?
I think the one to start with is obviously the Rocky Horror Picture Show. That's the quintessential cult film. It's the one that's made the reputation, and it's kind of fun,
It is fun, but you got to bring, or be prepared to get squirted.
Right.
Bring newspaper, maybe a roll of toilet tissue.
Don't wear your new clothes. Sunday best, right.
Also, if you go see Pink Flamingos, you're on your own. You didn't hear it from us.
Right, you didn't hear it here, and that's it for this show. And join us again next week when Gene and I will review 5 new films, and until then, we'll see you at the movies.